Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by a remarkable guest, Bob van Luijt, who is co-founder and CEO at Weaviate. Hello, Bob. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Barry. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Did I get the name right? I practiced it a couple of times.
You did. Yes, no, you did. You did. That was great. It's like definitely top five. Definitely top five.
That's what I'm aiming for. So, thanks for people who don't know you. Could you just tell a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Bob. I'm one of the co-founders of Weaviate. Before I'll dive in what that is, a little bit of my own background. So I'm working in software for a long time already. So I've always had my own. Started very small as like a freelancer. The first time I registered a company was in the Netherlands. Was when I was 15. So and I was always to write software, and of course that was very small projects, small things, but I stuck with that. And in 2015, that was my introduction to machine learning, and then mostly also natural language processing, so vector embeddings and that kind of stuff. I found it absolutely fascinating. We can double click on to why that is, but then a couple of years later, I actually got this idea like, hey, we can use this to build new infrastructure to deal with these embeddings. This is all, we didn't call it AI yet, that kind of stuff. So this is 2019. And then I met my co-founder, Etienne, who's currently the CTO of the company. And he was like, hey, actually, if we really want to do this on a database level, there's really like a database that focuses on working with these vector embeddings doesn't exist. So I said, well, if you focus on that part, then I'll focus on the rest in building the company around that. And that's how Weaviate was born. And it's always focused on these vector embeddings. And then all of a sudden, this whole AI boom happened. And people started to be interested in it, started to build with it. They started to use these models, be it through Hugging Face, be it through OpenAI, Cohere, etc., what have you, to generate these embeddings. And then they were like, why do we store these things? And I was like, hey, well, actually, that's what we do. And so we sat right in the slipstream of that. And then ChatGPT happened, and ChatGPT was very important to us because that was the first time that a unique use case emerged where this combination of these dedicated AI native databases, or vector databases they called, played a role in these so-called retrieval augmented generation use cases, where you want to retrieve data that you want to inject into the models. It was like a double, like a the rocket took off once and it took off again, right? So it's like it was double. So that was great. So and that's how the company started. But I'm at this for like a long time already, and I'm still. It's very hard for me when I see how big AI has become. It's very hard to wrap my head around that. It's because I was there from the very early days where like nobody cared. I can tell you that. That's in a nutshell who I am.
I think like ChatGPT and those kind of like generative AI, that's like the first introduction to the public, but there's also lots of different other applications for that rather than just that. Are there any ones that particularly excite you at the moment?
What I'm very excited about is the everything that we nowadays refer to as like agents or agentic, or the fancy term, the agentic architectures, right? And the reason why I'm so interested in this is because for a long time this has been a one-way street. So you have a query, you retrieve something, send it to the generative model, present the output. But what the agents do is that they basically route the traffic back into the database. And this is such a paradigm shift how we've been dealing with data management as opposed to how we've been doing this in the past, that I really believe that we're going to look back at this time 5 years from now or something, and it's definitely 10 years from now. Say this was another paradigm shift, like we've seen a paradigm shift when the cloud came, when mobile came, the web came before that, because it's a different way of organizing our data, interacting with the data, and that kind of stuff. So, and that's captured in these agentic architectures where the database like Weaviate is a core component. So that is something that I'm most excited about.
Are there any other trends or like currently within the industry that you think are going to become really popular perhaps in the near future that aren't yet out there? Any kind of predictions that you can talk about?
Yeah, you mean inside or outside AI?
Inside.
Let me give you like a pessimistic and optimistic answer, right?
I particularly love the pessimistic ones. Make them lavish if you can.
So there's this thing. Let me start there, right? So, but I say this with like a little bit tongue in cheek, right, with a smile, because everything is growing so fast. But there's this thing that if you look at these big steps in innovation, you can always trace them back to like one research paper. So when I started to work with these embeddings, there was around glove that came from Stanford. Then, of course, what we saw with generative AI, that was with the famous Transformers paper. And a lot of stuff that we're seeing right now is optimizing that. So then you have this novel thing, and then we optimize it and we not being as Weaviate, but we as developers all over the globe, we optimize the hell out of it. So we make it we optimize how we run it, we make it cheaper to run, more efficient to run, that kind of stuff. And that's great, and that's all very important for people to build these use cases. But it's the novel stuff, the new stuff that's more exciting. So the reason that I said like let me give the pessimistic view first is like I'm not seeing much of that right now. I'm seeing a lot of people building, which is exciting. I see a lot of people optimizing, which is exciting. But
why do you think that is? Why do you think that is right now? Why aren't people using it the way that you anticipate?
No. So people are using it the way I anticipated. It's more that I feel that there's just so much more that we can do that are like unsolved problems. Let me give you a simple example. It's the amount of data that we need to feed into these models to get to something reasonable. A human child needs significantly less to learn, right? And I never forget that I once gave a presentation. This couple years ago. I think it was at the tail end of COVID. For there was a Google developer group in Kenya. One of them, they asked me a question, and that really stuck with me. They said like, what do you think that the sermons are kind of become smaller or this or that? And I said, oh yeah, no, this is already solved problem. You can just take these models from Hugging Face, blah blah. And then the guy who asked the question is like, he said, yeah, that's a problem because we don't have an internet connection that allows us to just randomly, download these models. He said, we have to go to university or something to download them, and then we have them on our laptops, and then, so we need something else. And that is years ago. That's still an unsolved problem. So I'm looking forward. I hope that this year is the year where we see new novel research, right? Where that is helped. And we're doing our part when it comes to things like in these agentic architectures to generative feedback loops and those kind of things to make it easier and simpler to interact with the data. But there's so much more stuff that we can do. And that let me not end on the stuff, but on the positive side of things, that is what the fact that people are now seriously going to production, that fuels also new R&D and new stuff we're doing. So the stuff we're doing with these agentic architecture, generative feedback loops, that's something I'm super excited about because that is new stuff, right? So I hope this year, it's now January 8th when we record this, right? So I hope that this year we will see a lot of that new novel stuff that we've been seeing in 2023, the beginning of 2024, and I hope we see more of that this year.
Do you have any ongoing primary focal points or any ongoing projects or endeavors that you can talk about maybe coming up in the near future?
Yes. So I just mentioned the generative feedback loops. That is something we're going to release this quarter. And we're going to invite people to play around with that. And that's really that's a paradigm shift in how we deal with data management. And there's the famous saying, garbage in, garbage out when it comes to data. And this is a serious step at trying to fix that. And the joke that I always make internally, I hope you don't mind me saying it in a podcast, but I always say was this is the first time in history that we can turn chicken shit into chicken salad. So and that's something that I'm very excited about. We need to do a lot of work. We work a lot with design partners, of course, with the open source community to show people what it is. But the reason I'm so excited about it is because in the early days, so pre-AI, when I was working on Weaviate and I presented at conferences and I, show people how we could retrieve data objects based on these vector embeddings, that was people were like, whoa, that's cool. And now with generative feedback loops, we're back at that. So people are like, whoa, can you do that? It's like, yes, we can do that. No human labor needed anymore to fix all these master data management problems. We now can do that directly to the database in combination with the models. So that's why I'm so excited about it. And we're going to release it this quarter. We have already been talking about it a lot. We've done podcasts about it. We have the research team is investigating techniques like gorilla and that kind of stuff. But it's like, so that's super exciting because this is for the first time that your database is going to have an opinion on the actual data that you're storing in it.
Do you find, like, I can sense your excitement in it. I can sense that you're really passionate about it. Do you find it hard sometimes maybe not to dream so high, or you need to restrict, or the practical limitations of trying to get in what you want to get in? Is that something that you struggle with? Or are you the kind of person who is always reining in and trying to restrict so that you've got a more realistic approach?
That's an excellent question. So, look, what's interesting about where we are as a company, we're not a public company yet, right? So, if you're a public company and let's say you're a public database company and you want to do something exciting as the generative feedback loops, then that's always, you got yourself a quarter to prove that, right? The reason, and that is limiting these large, big juggernaut companies to do those kind of things and those kind of innovations. We are in a different spot, right? So we are in a space where we work with, of course, with our customer base, but we also still have funding in the bank to spend on R&D to really double down on this new paradigm. So that's a balance, right? So you work with your existing customer base, of course, and of course that needs to grow. Of course, that all speaks for itself. But you're also still in that state where you can innovate, and the risk is that I feel as a founder that you become too risk averse too soon. And this is the time to build. This morning I woke up and I read about a huge investment on my phone in Anthropic, right? This is the time to build. So yes, of course we have a lot of customers from very small to very big, and we serve them, and we have the teams to serve them, and they are running a product, which is all very important. But we should not stop innovating and spending on R&D, really moving into this new AI native space. So it's a balancing act, right? So you just do both, and we're in a lucky situation that we have the growing revenues on one thing, and we can spend stuff on that new stuff in the R&D. And I'm very well aware that that's a very luxurious position to be in as a company. But this is the time. It's not next year. It's now, and also not last year. So we need to keep building and keep going and really push the boundaries of what people know and expect of database technology today into this new paradigm of AI native.
So I don't really want to talk about like competitors, but talking generally, are there any other projects, companies, or people out there who are inspiring you to push yourself harder and faster in the environment?
So I think any big database company that you find on a NASDAQ is an inspiration to me. I have growing my I'm laughing with what I'm about to say, but I am my admiration for somebody like Larry Ellison and how he built Oracle is growing on a weekly basis. But also what companies like Elastic or MongoDB have done is super impressive. And it's like so when I study these companies, when I learn of these companies, I take a lot of inspiration from it. I learn a lot from it. I sometimes also learn a bit from like mistakes, right, from the past that we don't have to. But these companies are very successful. So can also be a company like Snowflake, you name it, right? All these companies you find there. The only thing that I'm doing, I want to be as successful, if not more than those companies. I just want to do it in the AI native space. That's the big difference, right? So, and of course, everybody wants to play in that space. We have one of our investors, and I believe it's Battery, but I might be wrong. They wrote in a blog post where they said there was a time last year somewhere that if you were a public company and you presented your quarterly results, a better way to see your stock price go up than talking about your revenue let's talk about what your AI strategy was, right? So it's like that we've been through those times. And so that's what I mean. So being able to play in that, if I go to a big event where all these big players are like AWS reInvent, Google Cloud Next, you name it, we're recognized. People know who we are, what we do. And yes, there's a competitive element to it, but it's on the other end, it also makes me very proud on, to be seen in that space. So it's, yes, there's a competitive element, but it's also something that I look up to, and that I was like, wow, I want to do that too. Right. And I also feel, although it's somewhat positioned, I understand that the analysts do this, and I understand why it's important to position this as a competitive thing. But I also look at it just from the perspective of, it's also so different when it comes to this AI native stuff. What they were trying, what I just explained of the generative feedback loops, right? That is so forward leaning as opposed to these more incumbents, right? From a competitive perspective, that is like so different. So I was like, I'm like, yeah. No, so I don't mind talking about it at all. But I don't see that as a pie is growing and the AI pie, and we're just in that. And they were in previous paradigms winners there, and now we try to do that for AI. So I think that's great.
So obviously, to say you've been successful is probably an understatement. But over the years, we've all made mistakes. How do you stay motivated and inspired? Like, it's easy when the times are good, but what about when times are particularly difficult, or when the journey feels like particularly challenging or demanding?
So sometimes I'm myself just a tiny angel investor in other companies, right? And then sometimes they ask me, so, what do you do as like CEO? And I said, well, you basically do three things. And I was like, so you need to articulate a vision, you need to have amazing people, and you need to have enough money, right, to execute on that vision. That's it. When the AI hype started to happen, it was very overwhelming. And I lost my mojo a little bit when it came to articulating that vision. Not to throw in a cliche, but with great powers come great responsibilities. And that was very challenging. That was very difficult for me. It was very challenging. But I had great mentors who helped me through this, and that I could talk to, and they gave me advice from their perspective. I think the best advice that I got was that I remember that there's which is not from a competitive perspective, but a really big company. They're a listed tech company on the Nasdaq, and I met this CEO because we through mutual investors, and I met him in his office, and I wanted to ask for some time from him to talk about this. So he was sitting at his laptop, and we were seeing a beautiful view over New York, and I asked him about this. Like, I'm a little bit, I don't know what to do, right? I was like, I'm struggling a little bit. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, that happens. Any other questions? And that was such an eye opener for me. I was like, you have that too? He's like, yeah, sure, of course, all the time. And for whatever reason, that was for me like and then I was like, and then I got just back to work, articulated. Team was happy that I was able to articulate it and supported with some data and that kind of stuff. And then we just kept going. So that's not exactly an answer to your question, but that's how I deal with these kind of situations, right? So you talk to people, you get help from mentors, from that kind of stuff, people you trust, and then you just put in the work. And then that's exciting.
Perfect. And great advice you just given. We are stuck for time, unfortunately. So just before we go, what advice could you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, people who want to start their own company or in the starting stages, and maybe they have some doubts? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, just do it. You have to just head first. Go. Go, 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 go.
Perfect. There you heard it from Bob, straight from the horse's mouth there. Excellent advice. Bob, I just want to thank you again so much for talking with me today. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Barry. Wonderful questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Bob van Luijt, co-founder and CEO at Weaviate.